And welcome back to the Financially Simple Experience. So friends, today I want to answer a question. I want to answer a question that I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you for some time, because during the pandemic, I heard this question posed to me as a business advisor. As I was speaking on Zoom at that point versus stages, I would have participants in the lecture raise a question, and the question would come in a myriad of different forms, but I can boil it down to this. When should we as business owners discontinue a particular service or product? When should we change away from a market? Now, perhaps you've considered that question yourself. Hey, should I stop doing X and go with Y? You know, one thing that's true about us as business owners is we have to be adaptable. We have to be in constant creation mode, realizing that consumer trends are going to change. Business is going to change. The economy is going to change. Demands. And as the economy, as business, all these various change, ebbs and flow, we may have to discontinue a product or service or change market altogether. But I got to tell you, that is a hard decision. You know, oftentimes we have this service, we have this product, we have this particular market that we really know. We know it well. We have our entire business tooled to deliver this particular offering. And to think that we're going to walk away from this particular offering to something else, or we're going to change our market to something else, man, there's a lot of cost involved. And it comes to a demand issue. It becomes to a cost versus value. It becomes to, hey, profitability versus value, manufacturing versus opportunity costs. There's so many things that we wrestle with when it comes to, should I change? Should I stop this offering? Should I go a different direction? So let's dissect this today. Let's look into this question and try to help wrestle through this question that no doubtedly you've had at some point in your career. In order to answer the question, we have to understand, first of all, a product life cycle, a life cycle. Investopedia, which is one of my go-to resources, it quotes a product life cycle as the length of time a product is introduced to consumers into the market until it's removed from the shelves. Product life cycle. Think about a product that you perhaps had as a child. I was laughing the other day as my kids were watching G.I. Joe. They're watching this G.I. Joe movie, and I can remember as whenever I was sitting at home, 9, 10, 11, watching G.I. Joe fight, Cobra Commander, and knowing it's half the battle and all the different things that go with that commercial. And I was reminiscing, and now that product, G.I. Joe's life cycle, has been revitalized. And here it is now with my children. Generation years go by. In a life cycle, there are 4 phases. And almost every product that we look at has gone through these phases or will go through these phases. First, there's an introduction. It's when this new product or this new service burst into the scenes. At the beginning, there's typically a slow demand, but nonetheless, it begins with an introduction. And then the second phase quickly, we hope, takes off, and that's growth. At this point, we start seeing demand increase. Promotions involved, marketing is involved. Our competition is now noticing, hey, they've done something different than what I'm doing at this particular phase. So it begins to grow. And ultimately, it reaches maturity. And this is the stage in the life cycle to which the product is now well established in its marketplace. Its production cost has declined. Your competitors may be offering something very similar. I'm thinking about the Yeti cooler. As an old country boy, there's not a lot of times whenever I won't have the Yeti cooler on the boat or in the truck. In fact, I just went on a cross-country trip, and we had the cooler in the back seat of the truck, so where we can reach back and grab ice cold coffee. I love some flavored coffees or a Red Bull or water, whatever it is that we're driving along. It's in the cooler, and that cooler will literally hold ice for a week or more sitting in the truck. I can remember when that Yeti came out, they were an introduction to the marketplace. Well, now it's that particular segment is reaching maturity. If you go into your local store, you're likely to see either a Yeti brand cooler or some sort of a knockoff like an Arctic. That's very similar to a Yeti, just not the same. So the product reaches a certain point to where it's well established in the marketplace, and then production cost begins to decline. Consumers maybe have already purchased one of that particular offering, and now they're looking at another, or perhaps a different brand. Perhaps they're looking at differentiation between the original look or the new look. Go back to the cooler, for example. I was in Cabela's, and they had their version of a Yeti cooler. And on their version, it had a bottle opener built into the top. It had a measuring tool on top of the cooler. So for fishermen, you could measure things. It had wheels on it that you could roll it. It had ergonomic handles that were built into the mold, which made it easier to pick up these heavy things. And so that particular industry is now past growth, and it's at maturity where we're looking at alternatives. We're looking at product differentiation now. But eventually sales will start to decline. And that's the fourth phase of a product life cycle. Eventually, the market becomes so saturated with the competitors that the price begins to decline, and the abundance of options drives the prices even lower. And then it's now time for new innovation, new product, which makes the old one obsolete. That is the life cycle. The life cycle of a product is dependent on many, many, many different things. For example, I love, on a hot summer day, a Coca-Cola Classic. We call them a Coke here in the South, but everything's a Coke. So if you know somebody from the South, you'll pull up to a drive-through and you'll say, hey, give me a Coke. And then they'll say, what type? Well, I want a Sprite, or I want a Dr. Pepper. I want a whatever it is. Everything's a Coke here in the South. But since 1892, Coca-Cola has had their Coke Classic. That product has lived on and on. I was in jest talking about pizzas before I turned the microphone on, and now everybody should want a pepperoni pizza or a sausage pizza. It's been around forever. On the other hand, the phone booth. Think about this. I can remember when I first started driving, we didn't have mobile phones in our cars. And you would have a pager, and then you pull over to go to a phone booth, or walk into a store that you knew perhaps the proprietor and ask to use their phone, but you would inevitably have a phone booth. Today, they're pretty much non-existent because the life cycles are short. So if we understand the product life cycle, how do we know in our business, how do we know as entrepreneurs that it's time to give up? It's time to stop offering a particular offer in your business. Let's first acknowledge the fact that we entrepreneurs have an unbelievable propensity for optimism. We can see good through the myriad of turmoil. We are optimistic people. That's who we are as business owners. And when it comes to cut ties with something that we're familiar, we often face not only optimism, but we also face familiarity bias. That we're going to cling to a product thinking that it's going to come back. There's some misguided sentiment. It's going to be there. It's going to say, hey, it will come back in fashion, almost like the bell-bottom jeans have come back in fashion. We first have to acknowledge that. And if we understand the bias that we have, then we can take an optimistic look and determine through objective criticism whether or not we should continue the product offering. So here are a couple points you might consider. First, is the total cost of the particular product increasing or decreasing rapidly? We should be looking at manufacturing costs, selling costs, transportation, storage costs, customer service cost. We want to tie all those to the product and try to figure out, is the cost reaching that point of saturation where now we have so much competition on the outside that our margins are being driven down. It's time for us to go back to creativity and launch a new product. So the first thing we look at is cost. Well, along with cost, we also have profitability. In the early days, whenever we're beginning to grow a product and we introduce a product or a service to the marketplace, we often have great margins. Our profitability is through the roof. Now, as we're building our mechanisms to deliver the service, whether it be through structures, processes, machinery, whatever it is, our margins are often great, very great in the beginning as we're driving this particular product forward. However, as the product begins to sunset, as it begins to mature, our profitability gets more and more narrow. And friends, I see this in just about every business. From a dental office, for example, where I can see profitability begins to wane in certain areas, to a car repair company, to a ditch digger, to law firms. I see it in so many businesses that we don't track profitability by the product, and therefore we really don't know if we've reached saturation that now it's time to come up with a new creative product to drive forward into the marketplace. Now, if you're trying to determine cost and profitability, it makes sense that you set your books up where you can do cost segregation. You can segregate the cost of the particular product or service. One of the things I love doing with dentists, and I've done this many, many times over the years, but you can apply this to any other business, no matter what your business is. Take one of your top leading services. Maybe you're putting tires on a car. Maybe it's oil changes. Maybe it is running power lines to a well pump. Whatever your service is, take the product that you feel like makes the most money. Then backwards engineer to how much you make per minute. Now, think about this. You have to have total revenue. You have to have your COGS, cost of goods, and what it's costing to produce that particular product. You have to backwards engineer your cost, your carrying cost, your SG&A is what I would call it. And you're going to look at, if I'm charging $1,000, and by the time I look through all this, I'm really only profiting $250 an hour. Great. If you can track whatever that number is for your highest producing product, you could track that over time. And as you start seeing your margins wane, you now have the ability to determine, hey, is it now time for me to shift from this old product, this old service, to perhaps a new product or service? Another thing to consider when you're looking at this change is opportunity cost. Now, this one's a little bit more subjective, but it goes without saying that if we're focusing our attention on one product, for whatever reason, we're unable oftentimes to focus that same attention, money, resources, human capital, social capital, whatever it is, on a potential other product. We could be harming ourselves by chasing an old, dying product or service whenever we should be focusing our attention on a new big product or service, which would make greater margins for our business. So opportunity cost is something we have to look at. And I kind of alluded to this earlier, but we also have employee cost. I was talking with a business owner, and we were looking at cost of production of this particular widget that they were dealing with. And I said, this particular employee, you're paying them $15 an hour, which equates to roughly $30,000 a year. If you take, and by the way, friends, that's simple, dirty math. If you're a business owner, here's quick math for you. 15 times 2 is 30, add 3 zeros is 30,000. That's how you can basically equate it. So if someone is making roughly $15 an hour, it's roughly $30,000 a year in employee costs. Now, depending on which state you're in, you may have to add like a 107% multiplier to that in order to calculate FICA FUTA SUTA. If there's 401k matches, you can adjust it nonetheless. It's a quick, dirty math calculation. So as I'm talking with this business owner, I'm like, look, you're paying this individual $15 an hour, $30,000 a year. But it's not just that. We also have the technology cost that's being supported by this employee. We have the training costs. We have the supervisory cost of this employee. See, whenever you're focused on one product, it can have a ripple effect throughout the team, causing the remaining team members to be more expensive, to be less confident, to lose direction, to lose the motivation they have. A study published in the International Business Research found that a low staff morale and low motivation could negatively impact competitiveness and productivity. Think about that. If your team has grown stale, offering the same old, then you could be missing margin in your business, which now is time to look at your employee morale, your employee cost, and determine, hey, now may be the time to shift and look at a new product, a new service, which is like a shot in the arm and gives your team that extra morale boost or extra motivation. Gallup did a study, and they found that highly engaged employees, those with a high morale, realized a 41% reduction in absenteeism and a 17% increase in productivity. So when you're looking at products, yes, we can look at cost. Yeah, I get it. We have to look at the true cost, the profitability. Yes, we can look at opportunity cost. But friends, one of the things that I often see business owners forsake is the employee cost. Having a team supercharged on what they're delivering to their clients or what they're delivering to your customers, having them engaged actually reduces your SG&A, gives you greater margin. So we really, really want to look at the employee cost. Now, one other cost I want to look at is the cross-selling opportunities. Cross-selling opportunities. If you look at your particular product array or your service array, do you have the ability to shift from product A or service A to service B or service C or service D? Whenever I go fishing, I love fishing whenever there's a treble hook. A treble hook. In other words, there's 3 hooks on the lure. And then if I get a lure that has 2 or 3 treble hooks on it, it means I have greater capacity to be able to potentially land that fish. We were recently fishing in Florida, my family and I, and we were off the coast of Florida, about 20 miles off, trying to catch some mahi. Actually, we had a blast catching mahi and some tuna. And on this particular lure that we were using for tuna, one of them had 1 hook sticking out the back. The other one had 2 treble hooks. In other words, there were 6 hooks sticking out the back of the lure. Wouldn't you know it, that we caught more fish on the lure that had 6 hooks than those that had 1? The same is true with our products and services. Whenever I dive into business, or our coaches, our business coaches dive into business owners' array and they look at their offerings, if there's only 1 hook, so to speak, pictorially speaking, that we can land the client with, it's not as effective as having multiple hooks, multiple products, multiple services. So as you're looking at your product array and you're trying to determine, hey, do I need to shift? Do I need to change? It may be that all you need to do is add a complementary secondary product, like a second hook, or a third hook, or a fourth hook. In order to do that, friends, you're going to have to do some tracking. You're going to have to track your sales. You're going to have to track your marketing performance. You're going to have to determine the fluidity of your business, the profitability of your business. All these things are things we teach our clients, and I've been teaching on the podcast now for some years. But I don't want you to forsake this cross-selling opportunity. Cross-sells is powerful. But I got to caution you. There's one other that I often see hurts a business more than anything else. Whenever they're looking at service or products, we often deal with this thing of cannibalization. Cannibalization. You have to determine, if you have several products or several services, is one service cannibalizing or, quote, eating the impact or the influence of another? It can happen for a number of reasons. I'll give you one example that you're going to say, oh, that makes sense. Apple. We know the name, Apple. You realize every time they introduce a new iPhone, the older versions iPhone sales immediately drop. Think about it. They come out with the iPhone, whatever the new one is going to be, the name of it, let's call it Coffee Cup, iPhone Coffee Cup. Their current offerings decline greatly. It's called cannibalization. They have a product which is drastically overshadowing or drastically stealing clients from other products. Now you say, Justin, that's not a big deal. You're right. It's not a big deal when you're an Apple type company who's what's called an R&D company, or research and development company, that your job is to roll out new products on a regular basis. But friends, in the service industry, which is where the vast majority of small businesses lie, we're not in the R&D business. We're not rolling out new products or new services on a regular basis. So when you dive into your product mix, oftentimes you can see where one of your services is cannibalizing another. In this case, you may want to temporarily remove one of the offerings. You may want to change the price points. You may want to change your service model. You may want to add a subsidiary product or service. So as we business owners are trying to navigate this world of business, and it is changing rapidly, holy cow, it's going so fast. One of the things we have to look at is the offering to which we deliver our customers, our clients. Obviously, we want an offering that's going to create stickability. It's going to retain our clients. We want an offering that's going to drive profitability. We want an offering that's going to drive scalability, ultimately drive value in our company. In order to do so, I'm going to challenge you to take a look at your particular offerings right now. What's the total cost? Is it declining? Are your margins waning? Is the profitability where it should be? Are you losing opportunity cost by focusing on your current offerings versus deploying resources into a new potential offering? When we look at employee cost, is it helping us maintain the profitability that we need? Do you have the ability to set multiple hooks? Do you have the ability for cross-selling opportunities in your business? And finally, are you cannibalizing? Is one product or one service negating the others? So now, we determine that we have an offering that is not as effective as it could be. How do we communicate the discontinuation of the offering? How do we let our customers know that, hey, I realize that you like offering A or service A. We're no longer going to offer this. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to prepare the message. The way that you communicate product discontinuation should encourage a customer to find a suitable replacement among your remaining offerings. You don't want them going out to another competition or competitor. You want them to stay with you. So here's how I would approach it. The first thing you're going to do is tell the customer why you're discontinuing the product. I've had so many medical professionals who were provider for one insurance, and the insurance cut their rates, the rate they're paying the doctor. And the doctor simply is no longer a provider for them. And I can't tell you how many times we've written letters explaining that the insurance company has cut the doctor's pay and the doctor is losing money by representing this particular insurance company, but we have a suitable solution for you over here. And yeah, there's a little bit of attrition, but not much. So the first thing you're going to do is be honest with your customers. Tell them why you're going to discontinue the offering. Then you're going to list the products that could be affected by this discontinuation. Next, you're going to tell the customer the last date they had to order this. You see it in business sometimes. They put a going out of business sale, and then they retool and they're back in business. I see it often with small business owners. But you're going to tell the customer, hey, we're getting rid of XYZ product or service. You can purchase this all the way up until this date. The next is you want to make sure that the last buy that makes, the last purchase they make has reasonable service, and you set the expectations. We see this often with Microsoft whenever they roll out a new version of their operating system or of their Microsoft Office suites. I can remember whenever Vista went away and all the communication that you would have on your computer that says, hey, Windows Vista is no longer going to be serviced. And it was years, or in your case, it might be months or weeks after the new rollout is launched. But here's where the magic happens. Yes, you want to tell the customer why you're canceling the product or service. You want to let them know that you're going to service that particular product. You're getting the last date. You can go through all those gyrations. But now you want to provide a suitable solution, an available solution that they can, okay, you can't buy product A, but let me tell you why product B is so much better than product A. You see, the way that you communicate a removal of a product drives perception. And as we often say, perception is a reality. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not going to face backlash. In 2020, during the middle of COVID, Taco Bell made the decision to discontinue the Mexican pizza from its menu. Now, part of the reason is it was going to save 7 million pounds of paper each year. However, when they did that, when they announced the discontinuation of the Mexican pizza, they received 170,000 signatures on change.org petitioning the fast food restaurant not to get rid of it. So look, just because you're going to discontinue something, just because you do all the steps right, doesn't mean that people aren't going to be outraged. At the end of the day, here's what matters. Are you driving value in your company? Are you able to deliver the service or the product to the customers that your product or service can help? Are you able to do it in a profitable manner, in a manner which is impacting not only your customers' lives, but the lives of yourself, your team, your employees, the vendors? I realize being a business owner is hard. Been 20 plus years, almost 30 years, I was calculating I've been a business owner. We have to make decisions day in, day out. And perhaps there's not another decision that's as challenging or as tricky to navigate as that of stopping one product or service and launching another. Very tricky, very tricky. If you find yourself at this particular phase in your life and you need some help, hey, reach out to us. We have a group of experts who can help you. Like I say every week, life is hard. It is. But life is good. We're so blessed. Unbelievably blessed. And it can be frustrating sometimes. It can be frustrating a lot of times. That's all right. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Y'all make it a great one.